Dr. Sarah Chin adjusted her microscope for the third time that evening, her eyes burning from hours of analyzing the strange blood samples that had arrived from hospitals across 3 different continents. The crimson liquid under the lens seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, containing cellular structures she had never encountered in her 15 years as a virologist. Outside her laboratory window at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, the city hummed with its usual late-night activity, completely unaware that humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. The samples had come with disturbing reports. Patients arriving at emergency rooms with bite wounds, high fevers, and an inexplicable aggression that required multiple orderlies to restrain them. What made these cases particularly alarming was the rapid deterioration of brain function, followed by what medical staff could only describe as a reanimation of basic motor functions despite the apparent clinical death of higher brain activity. Meanwhile, in downtown Chicago, Detective Marcus Rivera was responding to what dispatch had called a disturbance at Grant Park. As his patrol car approached the scene, he could see crowds of people running in panic, their screams echoing through the night air. The scene before him defied all logic and training. Dozens of individuals were attacking others with their bare hands and teeth, showing no response to verbal commands or even physical intervention. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, yet possessed a terrifying single-minded purpose. Marcus radioed for backup, but the reports flooding in from across the city suggested this was far from an isolated incident. Shopping malls, residential neighborhoods, and business districts were all experiencing similar outbreaks of inexplicable violence. The attackers seemed impervious to pain, continuing their assault even when seriously injured, and worst of all, their victims were beginning to exhibit the same aggressive behavior within hours of being bitten. Across the Atlantic in London, military strategist Colonel James Harrison was being briefed on what intelligence agencies were calling synchronized global incidents. The secure conference room was filled with officials from various government departments, all struggling to comprehend the reports streaming in from major cities worldwide. Tokyo, Sydney, Berlin, New York, and dozens of other metropolitan areas were experiencing identical outbreaks of what appeared to be a rapidly spreading contagion that affected human behavior in unprecedented ways. The affected individuals showed no recognition of family, friends, or authority figures, driven only by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. Traditional crowd control methods were proving ineffective, as the infected seemed to feel no pain and showed no fear of consequences. Colonel Harrison's years of experience in handling civil unrest had not prepared him for an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or intimidated. In a small farming town in Kansas, high school teacher Emma Rodriguez was barricading herself and 12 students in the school's gymnasium after witnessing their principal attack the janitor with savage brutality. The emergency broadcast system was repeating the same message every few minutes: seek immediate shelter, avoid contact with infected individuals, and await further instructions from local authorities. But Emma knew that local authorities were likely overwhelmed, and the steady moaning and scratching sounds coming from the other side of the gymnasium doors suggested that whatever was happening was spreading rapidly through their small community. The students looked to her for answers she didn't have, their faces reflecting the same terror she felt as she tried to process the impossible situation they found themselves in. Through the high windows, she could see fires burning in the distance and hear the occasional sound of gunfire, indicating that the chaos had reached even their remote location. Dr. Chen's computer chimed with an incoming priority message from the World Health Organization, containing preliminary reports from research facilities around the globe. The pattern was becoming clear. A previously unknown pathogen was spreading through human bites, causing rapid physiological changes that resulted in the loss of higher brain function while maintaining basic motor control and an overwhelming drive to spread the infection. The incubation period appeared to be between 1 to 6 hours, depending on the individual's immune system and the severity of the bite wound. Most disturbing was the discovery that the infected retained enough cognitive function to use simple tools and coordinate basic group activities, making them far more dangerous than initially assumed. As she scrolled through the mounting evidence, Dr. Chin realized that humanity was facing not just a medical crisis, but a potential extinction event that would require unprecedented global cooperation and military intervention to contain. The first wave of the zombie invasion had begun, and across the world, ordinary people were being forced to confront a horror they had only seen in movies, armed with nothing but their wits, their courage, and their desperate determination to survive and protect those they loved. 3 days after the initial outbreak, the world had transformed into an unrecognizable nightmare. Dr. Sarah Chin found herself trapped in her laboratory as the CDC facility was overrun by infected personnel who had been bitten while trying to help incoming patients. The emergency power flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows across the hallways where her former colleagues now wandered as mindless predators. She had managed to secure the lab's reinforced doors and had been surviving on vending machine snacks and bottled water, but she knew her supplies wouldn't last much longer. Through her computer, she maintained contact with a dwindling network of scientists worldwide, sharing crucial data about the virus's behavior and transmission patterns. The information was grim. The infection rate was accelerating beyond all mathematical models, and traditional containment protocols had proven completely ineffective against an enemy that felt no pain and showed no fear of death. Detective Marcus Rivera had watched his city descend into chaos from his makeshift command post in the Chicago Police Department's fortified precinct. The mayor had declared martial law, but the National Guard units that arrived were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of infected civilians. Radio communications were sporadic, filled with desperate calls for help from isolated pockets of survivors scattered throughout the metropolitan area. Marcus had organized the remaining officers into tactical teams, but their ammunition was running dangerously low, and every successful mission to rescue survivors seemed to attract larger hordes of zombies. The infected had learned to respond to sounds, gathering in massive groups that moved through the streets like a living tide of destruction. Through the precinct's windows, Marcus could see fires burning unchecked throughout the city, creating an orange glow that had replaced the familiar skyline he had protected for over a decade. Colonel James Harrison was coordinating the British military's response from an underground bunker beneath London, but the reports from field commanders painted a picture of complete governmental collapse. Parliament had been evacuated after infected individuals breached security, and the Prime Minister's location was classified even from him. The military was struggling to maintain communication with scattered units across the country, as cell towers and internet infrastructure were failing due to lack of maintenance and deliberate sabotage by panicked civilians. Intelligence reports suggested that similar breakdowns were occurring globally, with major governments either evacuating to secure locations or being completely overrun. The infected were displaying increasingly sophisticated behavior, using basic tools and coordinating attacks in ways that suggested some form of collective intelligence. Harrison's strategic mind was working overtime, trying to develop new tactics for an enemy that couldn't be demoralized, couldn't be captured, and seemed to grow stronger with each successful attack. Emma Rodriguez had managed to keep her group of students alive by moving them through the school's ventilation system to the roof, where they had signaled for help using mirrors and flashlights. A military helicopter had spotted them, but the pilot reported that the surrounding area was completely overrun and that extraction would be impossible until the immediate threat was neutralized. From their elevated position, Emma could see the full extent of the devastation that had befallen their small town. The main street was littered with abandoned vehicles, some still smoldering from crashes caused by panicked drivers fleeing the infected. The local hospital had become a focal point for zombie activity, with hundreds of the undead congregating around the building where injured victims had initially sought treatment. Emma's students were showing signs of severe psychological strain, and she struggled to maintain their hope while dealing with her own growing despair about their chances of survival. The global communication networks that had connected the world were beginning to fail as power grids collapsed and maintenance crews either fled or became infected. News broadcasts had become increasingly erratic, with reporters abandoning their posts as studio buildings were overrun by zombies. The last coordinated government announcement had been a desperate plea for citizens to seek high ground and avoid urban areas, but for millions of people trapped in cities, this advice came too late. Supply chains had completely broken down, leaving survivors to scavenge for food and medical supplies while avoiding the growing hordes of infected individuals who seemed to be driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. In research facilities around the world, the few remaining scientists were working frantically to understand the virus's mechanism and develop potential countermeasures. The pathogen appeared to be unlike anything in known medical literature, combining elements of viral infection with what seemed to be a form of parasitic control over the host's nervous system. Most disturbing was the discovery that the infected retained enough cognitive function to solve simple problems and remember basic information about their environment, making them far more dangerous than initially assumed. As society crumbled around them, these isolated researchers represented humanity's last hope for finding a scientific solution to the crisis that threatened to end human civilization as they knew it. 2 weeks after the initial outbreak, the scattered survivors had begun to realize that isolation meant certain death. Dr. Sarah Chin had finally escaped the CDC facility during a daring nighttime evacuation, carrying with her crucial research data about the virus stored on encrypted drives. She had made contact with a group of survivors holed up in a fortified shopping mall outside Atlanta, led by a former Army medic named Jake Morrison who had been organizing rescue missions for other trapped civilians. The mall's strategic location, with multiple entrances that could be secured and a large open space for coordination, had attracted nearly 200 survivors from various backgrounds. Among them were teachers, mechanics, doctors, police officers, and ordinary citizens who had all been forced to become warriors in this new reality. Jake had implemented a strict hierarchy based on practical skills rather than previous social status, recognizing that survival depended on everyone contributing their unique abilities to the collective effort. Detective Marcus Rivera had managed to lead a convoy of survivors out of Chicago, using his knowledge of the city's layout to navigate through areas with lower zombie concentrations. His group had grown to include other police officers, firefighters, and civilians who had proven their worth during the chaotic evacuation. They had established a temporary base in an abandoned industrial complex 40 miles south of the city, where they discovered a cache of construction equipment and tools that could be modified into weapons. Marcus had been in radio contact with similar survivor groups across the Midwest, sharing intelligence about zombie behavior patterns and effective combat strategies. The infected seemed to be most active during dawn and dusk hours, showing decreased mobility during extreme weather conditions, and they appeared to be drawn to areas with high concentrations of human scent rather than following individuals over long distances. Colonel James Harrison had successfully evacuated key military personnel to a secure facility in the Scottish Highlands, where he was coordinating with international military commanders who had managed to maintain operational capacity. The base had become a hub for survivors with military training, including Special Forces operatives, intelligence analysts, and weapons specialists who were developing new tactics specifically designed for combating the undead threat. Harrison had received reports of similar military installations across Europe, North America, and Asia that were serving as rallying points for organized resistance efforts. The military survivors had access to advanced communication equipment, allowing them to maintain contact with civilian survivor groups and coordinate joint operations. They had also begun analyzing captured zombie specimens, discovering that the infected retained enough motor function to climb obstacles and operate simple mechanisms, making traditional fortification strategies less effective than initially hoped. Emma Rodriguez had managed to lead her students to safety when a well-organized rescue team from a nearby farming community arrived at their school. The agricultural settlement had been fortified by local farmers who possessed both the practical skills and the equipment necessary to defend against zombie attacks. The community had grown to include several hundred survivors, including families with children who had been given priority during rescue operations. Emma had quickly become the settlement's education coordinator, establishing schools for the children while also helping to train new arrivals in essential survival skills. The farming community had several strategic advantages. They possessed knowledge of food production, had access to heavy machinery that could be weaponized, and occupied territory that was easier to defend than urban environments. They had also established communication networks with other rural settlements, creating a support system that spanned several states. The survivors were beginning to understand that the zombies exhibited certain predictable behavioral patterns that could be exploited strategically. The infected were attracted to loud noises and bright lights, but they seemed to lose interest in areas where human scent had been absent for extended periods. They moved in predictable patterns when following trails, often becoming trapped in areas with limited exit routes. Most importantly, the survivors had discovered that zombies were vulnerable to specific types of injuries, particularly damage to the brainstem and spinal cord, which could permanently disable them even if other injuries had no lasting effect. This knowledge had led to the development of specialized weapons and combat techniques that maximized effectiveness while conserving ammunition and reducing the risk of injury to human fighters. Communication networks between survivor groups were expanding rapidly, with ham radio operators, military personnel, and technology specialists working together to maintain contact across vast distances. These networks were sharing crucial information about safe routes, resource locations, and zombie movement patterns. The survivors were also beginning to coordinate large-scale operations, combining their different strengths to achieve objectives that would have been impossible for individual groups. Medical personnel were sharing information about treating bite wounds and preventing infection, while military strategists were developing comprehensive plans for reclaiming strategic locations such as power plants, communication facilities, and transportation hubs. The gathering of survivors represented humanity's first organized response to the zombie threat, transforming scattered individuals into coordinated communities capable of mounting effective resistance operations. As these groups continued to grow and establish contact with each other, they began to realize that survival was only the first step toward the ultimate goal of reclaiming their world from the undead army that had driven them from their homes. 1 month after the initial outbreak, the survivor communities had evolved from desperate refuges into organized military forces capable of launching coordinated offensives against the zombie hordes. Dr. Sarah Chin had become the chief scientific advisor for what was now called the Southern Alliance, a confederation of survivor settlements spanning from Atlanta to New Orleans. Her research had led to the development of specialized ammunition that could more effectively destroy zombie brain tissue, and she had established mobile laboratories that could quickly analyze zombie specimens captured during raids. The Southern Alliance had grown to include over 3,000 survivors, with fortified settlements connected by secured communication networks and regular supply convoys protected by armed escorts. Jake Morrison had been promoted to overall military commander, implementing training programs that turned ordinary civilians into skilled zombie fighters capable of executing complex tactical maneuvers. Detective Marcus Rivera had become the leader of the Midwest Coalition, a network of survivor groups that controlled a strategic corridor stretching from Chicago to Kansas City. His background in law enforcement had proven invaluable in organizing the diverse collection of communities into a unified fighting force. The coalition had established multiple fortified bases, each specializing in different aspects of the resistance effort: weapons manufacturing, food production, medical treatment, and intelligence gathering. Rivera's forces had developed innovative tactics for urban warfare against zombies, including the use of modified vehicles as mobile weapons platforms and the creation of sound-based lures that could redirect zombie hordes away from civilian populations. The coalition had also established trade relationships with other survivor groups, exchanging manufactured goods for raw materials and information about zombie movements. Colonel James Harrison had transformed his Scottish Highland facility into the headquarters of the European Resistance Network, coordinating military operations across multiple countries. The network had successfully reclaimed several strategic locations, including power plants, communication facilities, and weapons manufacturing centers. Harrison's forces had access to advanced military equipment, including armored vehicles, aircraft, and heavy weapons that could eliminate large numbers of zombies with minimal risk to human fighters. The European network had also established secure communication links with survivor groups in North America, Asia, and Australia, creating a global intelligence network that tracked zombie movements and shared tactical innovations. Harrison had been promoted to Supreme Commander of European Operations, overseeing joint military actions that involved thousands of trained soldiers and civilian volunteers. Emma Rodriguez had become the Education and Training Coordinator for the Great Plains Federation, a collection of rural communities that had formed a defensive alliance across the American heartland. The Federation controlled vast agricultural territories that served as the primary food source for multiple survivor networks, making their defense crucial to the overall resistance effort. Emma had developed comprehensive training programs that taught both children and adults essential survival skills, including weapons handling, first aid, and zombie identification techniques. The Federation had also established mobile schools that could quickly evacuate to secure locations when zombie attacks threatened civilian populations. Under Emma's guidance, the educational system had become a vital component of maintaining morale and preparing the next generation for the ongoing struggle against the undead threat. The resistance forces had discovered that zombies were vulnerable to certain environmental conditions and chemical compounds that could be exploited in large-scale operations. Fire-based weapons were particularly effective, as zombies seemed unable to respond appropriately to burning injuries, often continuing to attack even while being consumed by flames. The survivors had also learned that zombies avoided areas with certain chemical odors, leading to the development of repellent compounds that could create temporary safe zones around important facilities. Most significantly, the resistance had discovered that zombies became less aggressive during extreme cold weather, providing opportunities for winter offensives that could clear large areas with reduced casualties. Coordinated attacks had begun targeting key infrastructure locations that would be essential for rebuilding civilization after the zombie threat was eliminated. These operations involved multiple survivor groups working together to overwhelm zombie defenses through simultaneous assaults from different directions. The resistance forces had developed specialized equipment for these missions, including portable communication devices, lightweight protective armor, and weapons specifically designed for close-quarters combat against zombies. Medical teams had also been trained to provide immediate treatment for bite wounds, significantly reducing the infection rate among fighters who sustained injuries during combat operations. The Resistance had established secure manufacturing facilities that could produce ammunition, weapons, and other essential supplies using materials scavenged from abandoned industrial sites. These facilities were heavily defended and operated around the clock to maintain the equipment needed for ongoing military operations. The survivors had also developed efficient logistics networks that could rapidly transport supplies and personnel between different bases, ensuring that all resistance groups had access to the resources they needed for effective combat operations. Intelligence gathering had become a crucial component of resistance operations, with specialized teams conducting reconnaissance missions to map zombie movements and identify strategic targets. These teams had discovered that zombies were beginning to exhibit more complex behavioral patterns, including the ability to coordinate group attacks and the use of simple tools as weapons. This evolution in zombie capabilities had forced the Resistance to constantly adapt their tactics and develop new strategies for combating an enemy that was becoming increasingly sophisticated and dangerous. 6 weeks after the outbreak began, Dr. Sarah Chen made a breakthrough that would change everything humanity understood about their undead enemies. Working in her mobile laboratory with tissue samples from recently captured zombies, she discovered that the infection wasn't purely biological as previously assumed. The pathogen contained synthetic components that could only have been created through advanced genetic engineering, suggesting that the zombie plague was not a natural occurrence but a deliberately engineered weapon. Her analysis revealed microscopic nanobots integrated into the viral structure, designed to override the host's nervous system while maintaining basic motor functions. The implications were staggering. Someone had created this nightmare deliberately, and they might still be alive and monitoring the pandemic's progress. Chen immediately shared her findings with the other resistance networks, knowing that this discovery could provide the key to developing a cure or at least a more effective treatment for the infection. Detective Marcus Rivera had been investigating reports of unusual zombie behavior in the territories controlled by the Midwest Coalition when he stumbled upon evidence that supported Chen's scientific findings. His teams had discovered an abandoned research facility outside St. Louis that contained extensive documentation about something called Project Lazarus. The facility had been hastily evacuated, but the remaining computer files revealed a conspiracy involving multiple governments and private corporations working together to develop biological weapons for population control. The documents indicated that the zombie virus had been designed as a controllable weapon, with specific trigger mechanisms that could theoretically be used to halt or reverse the infection process. Rivera's investigation team had also found evidence of recent human activity at the facility, suggesting that some of the original researchers might have survived and were continuing their work from hidden locations. Colonel James Harrison received classified intelligence from his contacts in the international military community that corroborated the evidence found by Chen and Rivera. European intelligence agencies had been tracking suspicious financial transactions and communication patterns that suggested a coordinated cover-up involving high-level officials from multiple countries. The zombie outbreak had been preceded by unusual military exercises and the relocation of key personnel to secure underground facilities, indicating that certain individuals had advanced knowledge of the coming catastrophe. Harrison's intelligence network had identified several potential locations where the original research team might be hiding, including underground bunkers and remote military installations that had been constructed in secret over the past decade. The revelation that the zombie plague was an act of biological warfare rather than a natural disaster had profound implications for how the resistance forces would need to approach their fight for survival. Emma Rodriguez had been working with children in the Great Plains Federation when she made an unexpected discovery that added another piece to the puzzle. Several of the children in her care had been exposed to zombie bites but had not become infected, displaying what appeared to be a natural immunity to the virus. Medical tests revealed that these children possessed a rare genetic marker that seemed to provide protection against the synthetic components of the infection. Emma's discovery suggested that the virus had been designed to affect specific genetic populations while leaving others unharmed, indicating that the creators of the weapon had intended to preserve certain groups while eliminating others. This finding provided hope that a genetic therapy could be developed to grant immunity to the broader population, but it also raised disturbing questions about the true motives behind the zombie outbreak. The resistance networks had begun coordinating their efforts to locate and capture members of the original research team, believing that these individuals held the key to stopping the zombie plague. Intelligence gathering operations had intensified, with specialized teams conducting high-risk missions to investigate suspected hideouts and research facilities. The survivors had discovered that the zombies were receiving some form of remote guidance, explaining their increasingly sophisticated behavior and coordinated attacks. This revelation meant that the Undead army was not operating independently but was being directed by human controllers who remained safely hidden while orchestrating the destruction of civilization. Scientific analysis of the zombie virus had revealed that it contained built-in limitations designed to prevent the complete extinction of the human species. The infection had specific expiration dates programmed into its synthetic components, suggesting that the creators intended for the outbreak to be temporary and controllable. However, the resistance scientists had also discovered that these safeguards were beginning to fail, potentially leading to mutations that could make the virus more dangerous and less predictable. Time was running out to find the original researchers and force them to reveal the methods for stopping the infection before it evolved beyond anyone's control. The discovery that the zombie outbreak was an engineered weapon had united the various resistance networks under a common purpose: finding and confronting the individuals responsible for unleashing this horror upon the world. The survivors now understood that they were not just fighting mindless undead creatures but were engaged in a war against human enemies who had betrayed their own species. This knowledge had strengthened their resolve and provided new motivation for the battles ahead, as they realized that defeating the zombies was only the first step toward bringing the true perpetrators of this catastrophe to justice and preventing similar attacks in the future. Armed with the knowledge that the zombie plague was a manufactured weapon controlled by human perpetrators, the resistance networks launched their most ambitious operation yet: a coordinated global assault on the facilities where the original research team was believed to be hiding. Dr. Sarah Chin had developed a prototype antiviral compound based on her analysis of the synthetic virus components, but she needed access to the original laboratory equipment to mass-produce an effective cure. The Southern Alliance had identified a heavily fortified underground complex in the Appalachian Mountains that matched the specifications found in the Project Lazarus documents. Chen led a team of scientists and soldiers on a high-risk mission to infiltrate the facility, knowing that the breakthrough they needed was likely locked behind layers of automated defenses and zombie guardians that had been strategically placed to protect the installation. Detective Marcus Rivera coordinated a simultaneous assault on the St. Louis research facility, where his intelligence teams believed they had located the primary control center for the zombie network. The Midwest Coalition had discovered that the facility contained powerful transmission equipment capable of sending control signals to zombies across the entire North American continent. Rivera's forces had to overcome not only the traditional zombie hordes but also encountered a new type of evolved undead that displayed enhanced intelligence and coordination abilities. These advanced zombies could use weapons, set traps, and execute complex tactical maneuvers that made them far more dangerous than the standard infected. The battle for the facility became a desperate struggle as Rivera's team fought through multiple levels of underground laboratories while racing against time to prevent the controllers from activating what appeared to be a final phase protocol that would make all zombies permanently aggressive and uncontrollable. Colonel James Harrison led the European Resistance Network in a massive assault on a secret installation beneath the Swiss Alps, where satellite surveillance had detected unusual electromagnetic activity consistent with the zombie control systems. Harrison's forces included elite military units from multiple countries, supported by advanced weaponry and armored vehicles that had been specifically modified for underground combat operations. The facility they attacked was defended by thousands of zombies that had been strategically positioned in defensive formations, suggesting that the controllers had anticipated an assault and prepared accordingly. Harrison's troops encountered automated defense systems, including turret guns and poison gas dispensers, that had been designed to eliminate both zombies and human intruders who might threaten the secret research operations. Emma Rodriguez had volunteered to lead a specialized team tasked with rescuing the children who possessed natural immunity to the zombie virus, believing that these young survivors held the key to developing a universal vaccine. The Great Plains Federation had traced several of these immune children to a secure facility in Colorado, where they were being held for experimental purposes by the remaining Project Lazarus researchers. Emma's mission was complicated by the discovery that the children were being used as test subjects for new virus variants, with the scientists attempting to overcome their natural immunity through genetic manipulation. The rescue operation became a race against time as Emma's team fought through specially designed zombie variants that had been created using the children's genetic material, resulting in undead creatures that were faster, stronger, and more intelligent than any previously encountered. The counterattack operations revealed that the zombie controllers had been preparing for eventual human resistance and had developed countermeasures designed to neutralize organized survivor groups. The evolved zombies encountered during the assaults displayed the ability to communicate with each other through a form of primitive sign language, coordinate group attacks with military precision, and even demonstrate problem-solving skills that allowed them to overcome obstacles and adapt to changing battlefield conditions. These advanced undead retained enough human memory to recognize and prioritize high-value targets, making them particularly dangerous to the resistance leadership and scientific personnel who were crucial to the survival effort. The simultaneous nature of the global assault had stretched the resistance forces to their limits, but it had also prevented the controllers from concentrating their defenses or evacuating to alternate locations. Communication between the various resistance networks became crucial as they shared real-time intelligence about enemy capabilities and coordinated their attacks to maximize effectiveness. The operations had also revealed the true scope of the conspiracy, with evidence suggesting that similar facilities existed on every continent and that the zombie outbreak was part of a larger plan to reshape global civilization according to the controller's vision. Despite suffering heavy casualties, the resistance forces had succeeded in capturing key personnel and obtaining crucial information about the virus control systems. The prisoners revealed that the zombie plague had been designed as the first phase of a multi-stage operation, with additional biological weapons prepared for release if the initial outbreak failed to achieve the desired level of population reduction. The controllers had also developed advanced zombie variants that were being held in reserve, including aerial and aquatic forms that could extend the threat beyond terrestrial environments. The success of the counterattack had bought humanity time to develop effective countermeasures, but it had also escalated the conflict to a new level of intensity as the remaining controllers prepared to activate their final contingency protocols. The intelligence gathered from the captured facilities revealed a terrifying truth. The zombie controllers had initiated their final protocol, preparing to release a second-generation virus that would make the current outbreak seem manageable by comparison. Dr. Sarah Chin had successfully synthesized enough antiviral compound to treat several thousand infected individuals, but the new virus strain was designed to be immune to all existing treatments. The controllers had also activated sleeper agents embedded within the resistance networks, leading to coordinated attacks on key survivor settlements from within. The Southern Alliance found itself fighting a two-front war as trusted allies revealed themselves to be enemy operatives, sabotaging communication networks and poisoning food supplies while zombie hordes pressed their assault from the outside. Chen worked frantically in her mobile laboratory, racing to develop a new treatment while her research facilities came under constant attack from both zombies and human traitors. Detective Marcus Rivera discovered that the St. Louis facility had been a decoy operation, with the real control center located in a massive underground complex beneath Denver. The Midwest Coalition had suffered devastating losses during the previous assault, and Rivera found himself leading a desperate evacuation of civilian populations as the evolved zombies launched coordinated attacks on all major settlements simultaneously. The new zombie variants could operate vehicles, use firearms, and execute complex battle strategies that made them nearly indistinguishable from human soldiers except for their relentless aggression and lack of self-preservation instincts. Rivera's remaining forces had to protect thousands of refugees while fighting a running battle across the Great Plains, with zombie armies converging on their position from multiple directions. The detective realized that this final assault was designed to eliminate the resistance leadership and break the spirit of the remaining survivors. Colonel James Harrison had uncovered evidence that the zombie plague was merely the opening phase of a global depopulation program designed to reduce the human population to manageable levels for the surviving elite. The European resistance network had been infiltrated at the highest levels, with several key commanders revealed to be working for the controllers. Harrison found himself isolated with only a handful of loyal troops, fighting to prevent the activation of additional biological weapons that would make the zombie virus seem like a minor inconvenience. The final facility was located on a remote island in the North Atlantic, protected by advanced military defenses and guarded by thousands of the most evolved zombie variants. Harrison's mission had become a suicide assault, with the understanding that preventing the release of the second-generation virus was worth any sacrifice. Emma Rodriguez had successfully rescued the immune children, but the genetic analysis revealed that their immunity was temporary and would fade within days unless they received regular treatments derived from the original virus samples. The Great Plains Federation had been overrun by zombie forces that seemed to know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage to the agricultural infrastructure. Emma found herself leading a convoy of survivors and immune children toward a rendezvous point in the Rocky Mountains, where the resistance networks planned to make their final stand against the zombie army. The journey became a nightmare of constant attacks, with zombie forces that seemed to anticipate their every move and counter their tactical decisions. Emma realized that the controllers were using the immune children as bait to draw the remaining resistance forces into a trap where they could be eliminated permanently. The final battle began when all remaining resistance forces converged on a fortified mountain complex where the controllers had established their ultimate command center. The facility was protected by an army of evolved zombies that had been enhanced with cybernetic implants, making them faster, stronger, and more intelligent than any previous variants. These cybernetic zombies retained enough human memory to recognize individual resistance leaders and prioritize them for elimination. The battle became a desperate fight for survival as the resistance forces found themselves outnumbered and outgunned by enemies that combined the relentless aggression of zombies with the tactical intelligence of trained soldiers. The resistance had discovered that the controllers planned to survive the apocalypse in underground bunkers, emerging only after the zombie armies had eliminated all opposition and the second-generation virus had run its course. The final phase of their plan involved using the immune children to create a new human subspecies that would be genetically programmed to serve the elite controllers without question. The battle for the mountain facility became humanity's last chance to prevent the complete subjugation of the human race to the twisted vision of the Project Lazarus architects. As the final assault began, the resistance forces realized that they were fighting not just for their own survival but for the future of human freedom itself. The controllers had revealed their true intentions: to reshape humanity into a controllable species while eliminating anyone who might oppose their authority. The battle would determine whether the human spirit of independence and resistance could overcome the calculated brutality of those who viewed their fellow humans as expendable resources. The fate of civilization hung in the balance as ordinary people who had been transformed into warriors by necessity prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to ensure that future generations would inherit a world worth living in. The final battle raged for 3 days and nights across the mountain complex, with the fate of humanity decided in desperate hand-to-hand combat between the last free humans and the cybernetic zombie army. Dr. Sarah Chin had managed to complete her work on the universal antiviral compound just as the facility's laboratory came under direct assault from evolved zombies that seemed specifically programmed to target her research. In a moment of brilliant improvisation, she realized that the compound could be dispersed through the same transmission network that controlled the zombie army, turning the controller's own technology against them. Working with the few remaining technicians, Chin jury-rigged a transmission device that would broadcast the antiviral formula directly into the cybernetic implants of every zombie on the planet, effectively reprogramming them to self-destruct their viral components. Detective Marcus Rivera had led the final assault on the command center, fighting through waves of cybernetic zombies that defended the facility with military precision. During the battle, he discovered that one of the Project Lazarus controllers was someone he had trusted completely: his former police captain, who revealed that law enforcement agencies had been infiltrated from the beginning to ensure the operation's success. The betrayal fueled Rivera's determination as he fought his way to the central control room, where he found banks of computers monitoring zombie movements across the globe. In a final act of heroism, Rivera activated Chen's antiviral transmission just as the controllers attempted to release the second-generation virus, sacrificing himself to ensure that the signal reached every zombie on Earth before the backup systems could be activated. Colonel James Harrison had successfully infiltrated the deepest levels of the facility, where he confronted the true architects of the zombie apocalypse, a council of international elites who had orchestrated the outbreak as part of their plan to create a new world order. The controllers showed no remorse for the billions of deaths they had caused, viewing the devastation as a necessary step toward their vision of a perfectly controlled society. Harrison's final mission was to destroy the genetic laboratories where the second-generation virus was being prepared for global release. Even as cybernetic zombies tore through his protective gear, Harrison managed to detonate explosive charges that collapsed the entire underground complex, ensuring that the controllers' backup plans died with them in the mountain facility. Emma Rodriguez had reached the command center just as Chen's antiviral transmission began to take effect across the global zombie population. The cybernetic zombies suddenly stopped their coordinated attacks, their implants overloaded by the conflicting signals as the antiviral compound destroyed the viral components that had animated their dead tissue. Emma watched in amazement as thousands of zombies simply collapsed where they stood, their cybernetic enhancements shutting down as the virus that powered them was systematically eliminated. The immune children she had protected throughout the ordeal proved to be the key to the final victory, as their genetic material provided the template that allowed Chen's compound to distinguish between zombie and human tissue during the global transmission. In the aftermath of the battle, the surviving resistance members emerged from the mountain facility to discover a world transformed. The antiviral transmission had worked beyond their wildest hopes, not only destroying the existing zombie population but also providing permanent immunity to any human who had been exposed to the compound through the global broadcast. Cities that had been overrun with zombies now stood empty but clean, waiting for human survivors to reclaim them. The second-generation virus had been destroyed along with its creators, ensuring that no similar outbreak could threaten humanity in the future. The rebuilding process began immediately, with the various resistance networks coordinating to establish new governments based on the cooperation and mutual aid that had sustained them during the darkest period of human history. Emma Rodriguez became instrumental in developing educational systems that would teach future generations about the importance of vigilance against those who would abuse scientific knowledge for personal gain. The immune children, no longer needed as genetic templates, were adopted into loving families and grew up in a world that valued their unique contribution to humanity's survival. Dr. Chen's antiviral compound became the foundation for a new medical revolution, leading to treatments for previously incurable diseases and advancing human understanding of genetic therapy by decades. The technology developed during the resistance effort was repurposed for peaceful applications, including advanced communication networks that connected survivor communities across the globe and agricultural innovations that helped restore food production to pre-outbreak levels. The zombie apocalypse had ended not with the extinction of humanity but with the birth of a new civilization built on the principles of cooperation, scientific responsibility, and respect for human life. The survivors had learned that their greatest strength lay not in their weapons or technology but in their willingness to sacrifice for each other and their refusal to abandon hope even in the darkest circumstances. The new dawn brought with it the promise that humanity would emerge from this trial stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring with the knowledge that they had already overcome the worst that human evil and undead horror could devise.